Hi, and welcome to Sama Sisters Against Mental Abuse. I'm your host, Misty, and today we have an expert on the show. Miss Vanessa Filmonor is a psychotherapist and mental health practitioner. She also has worked with victims of domestic violence for a long time. She is also the co host of a podcast called Life is But a Vacuum. So if you're interested, check that out. You'll probably notice that our episode was cut short a little bit because of time, but I am definitely anticipating having Vanessa come on for another episode sometime in the future. So you all let me know what you think about that, and maybe if you have any other questions that would be helpful, let me know. So without any further delay, here is my conversation with Miss Vanessa. Hello, Vanessa, and thanks for being here today. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, and so you are the first expert that I've had on. So I have a lot of questions for you. I really want to start with like who you are, your titles, your experience. Could you share with us?
I have to talk about myself. Okay. I'm a clinical mental health counselor, aka psychotherapist, aka counselor, a therapist. I received my degree from Northwestern University. Prior to that, I worked with survivors of domestic violence, human trafficking, sexual assault, and New Jersey, and also in Southern Delaware. So that's a little bit, I've done that work for over 10 years, until I make the switch to be a psychotherapist in private practice. But I still see a lot of clients who experience trauma, will walk to my door. That's the kind of work that I do, just working with trauma survivors. So that's a little bit about me. I'm licensed in the state of New Jersey, practicing there, and I love all things mental health, wellness, and spiritual health. That's my jam. So whenever I get a chance to talk about these things, I get really excited. I hope I answered your questions because
Oh yeah.
I don't like talking about myself like that.
No, I feel free. But I do want to ask you another question about yourself. So what got you into the mental health field?
Oh, that's a that's a long story, actually. I was in my own journey in therapy. Um, just coming from being an immigrant from Haiti and experiencing my own trauma, and I would say that most of us, if you're a person of color, you have some kind of trauma in this world, unfortunately. Even if it wasn't from a family member or someone close to you, the world has a way of traumatizing us. Um, so like my own journey in therapy started when I was in college, undergrad. Um, I knew something was a little off. I'm not going to say something was wrong with me because there's nothing wrong with us. There's something wrong with the system and how it impacts us. There's nothing wrong with the way that we react to trauma. We can talk about that later on, and that's a different episode as far as trauma response. Um, I was experiencing a lot of anxiety and panic attacks, and I didn't know what they were. When I was in high school, my parents would take me to all these doctors, and all these doctors would say, "Her heart is fine, everything is okay." And it wasn't until undergrad, then I'm like, oh, maybe I should go to the counseling center. So I went to the counseling center. That was my first experience in counseling. Um, and that really started my journey in being in therapy, and just really opened my eyes to the healing that can happen. And I took an interest in that, worked with clients one-on-one. I did some case management. I did a lot of other work. And eventually I'm like, I'm going back to school. I want to, I want to be a therapist. And I went back to school in 2019, on September 2019, and everything shut down in March 2020. So I was in grad school in the middle of a pandemic, which was fun. But here we are. But I would say it was worth it. So that's a little bit more about my journey and how I became interested. I guess it's a personal one.
Wow. Yeah, it definitely is. And I want to say thank you for even like being a part of that because we need more Black women in this field. I love to see you in this
Thank
space. So you did say that you had worked with victims of trauma and you've seen a lot. Um, were there any differences that you noticed when working with Black women in particular? Anything that stuck out in these kinds of like abusive relationships or anything in general that you noticed?
Of course, yes. Like there's big differences. Like just in general, like in my work, I was just talking to a colleague about it. How even the way that Black people have experienced COVID and how white people have experienced it in the space. Just in general, we experience things differently. But I'll say that when it comes to gender-based violence or what we call interpersonal violence, it's different for us as Black women because a lot of time, in these relationships, there's still that level of loyalty that we have to our race. There's a level of loyalty that we have to the person that who is abusing us. And one of the things that I used to see a lot was the reluctance to report. There's a reluctance to seek um, police response, right? Because nobody wants to call the police on a Black man if the person that's abusing you is male identifying. So there's that level of I don't want to do this, and if we do, there's that backlash that you might receive from this person's family, that you put them there if they do get convicted and go to prison for what they've done to you. So there's a lot of that going on. And there's also, if you put into, you have that trauma and you have poverty. When I was working with survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault, I worked with mostly women who were low income in Paterson, New Jersey. And poverty also has a big it's a big risk as well. And then I worked in an environment where most of my clients were well off. And you see the difference. They were able to get these big shot lawyers and show up and get their restraining orders and do what they got to do. And the black and brown clients that I was seeing in Paterson, New Jersey, they have different resources or lack thereof. They didn't have as much resources as the other clients who had the money, who had the resources, right? So there's a lot of that stuff that goes on. So there's a big difference that goes on. So you have the culture difference as well. So how do you respond to domestic violence in your own community? I'm Haitian. So if you come from a background where it's normalized and this is how things are, you don't talk about it, it could, there's also that level of I'm telling a stranger about my business. I'm telling a stranger about how the men in my culture behave, and there's shame in that. There's shame and guilt in that. So there's still that. So we also have to be very mindful. So of that, so I'm gonna try not to go too much into details because I can go on and on about this.
Yeah, I think earlier when we were talking about more of the mental aspect, you said something that really struck me. You said that you would see a Black woman be in the system for years and years, and it seemed like a cycle. And I think you mentioned that the access to therapists was like a big thing, a big
Yeah, of
difference.
course. Yeah, it's a big difference, right? It's there's still, right now we are this. I would say therapy is more accessible now, but I'm not gonna say it's accessible to everyone. There's still barriers. There's cost that we have to be very mindful of. There's a lack of Black therapists out there, and the ones who are out here, we can't see everybody. So, and if we do, we'll be burned out. We can't. And we also have to make a living. So we have to charge for our services. So sometimes the people that we go into the field to help, we really can't help because they can't afford to be with us. And we can't take everybody on the sliding scale because we have to pay bills, right? So there's still that level of, there's no, how can I say this? It's not accessible. It's not, I would say as well, when in my work, one of the things I was seeing a lot of was the way that Black survivors, I'm going to say survivors in the space because I don't believe in labeling people as victims unless they see themselves as victims. But if you were alive, you survived. So I'm going to use that word.
Right.
I think
right.
it's more empowering than being a victim.
Right.
But a lot of Black survivors, there was the stereotypical way that people would view them. Oh, well, this person is not willing to leave this relationship. That means they want to be in there. That means that or this person is aggressive. I used to hear that word a lot from my white colleagues.
Oh, wow.
She's aggressive. She is not willing to do the work. So we're gonna have to call DCPNP and get her. DCPNP is the Department of Children and Permanency in the state of New Jersey. So what you would call CPS in your state. Let's call CPS to get her kids taken because she's not doing what we want her to do. So there was a lot of grace and empathy that I saw a lot from white social workers when I was in that space. And that's why I left that space because I felt very helpless a lot of time. And I was always yelling at somebody. I was always advocating for someone. And I felt like at some point I was also labeled as aggressive as well, because I was always the one that had to advocate for when I see something.
Oh, no.
And also the police response. Black women going to the police is different than the white women who going to the police about something, reporting something like that. So, it's more like, so we have to talk about the systems. So there are services, but not everybody can use those services. There are barriers for these services. Even domestic violence shelters. Black women are more likely to get kicked out of those shelters if they misbehave, quote unquote, misbehave in those safe spaces as well. They're more likely to experience microaggression. I was reading last year when I did my capstone project, and I was doing some research on why Black people don't stay in therapy. I find that 50% of Black people that go into therapy drop out because they also experience microaggression and racism from their therapists. So a space that is supposed to be helpful to you is also causing you more harm. So of course you're not going back.
Oh, wow. Now, see, I had never heard about this. Oh, wow. It makes sense, but I had never heard about that. And I have heard a lot of Black friends and family members say, I ain't going back to no therapist. Or, if they do get past the stigma of if you go to a therapist and you're crazy, then they find a therapist and the therapist doesn't take them seriously, or, they have a negative experience.
Yes. So the moment that you have that negative experience, I think that, the statistics say it was over half of clients, once they experience that, they don't come back. And most of them would say it's for microaggression. I experienced that in my own journey. I remember a therapist completely invalidated me. I got pulled over on my way to her office. She worked in a very white part of town. And the officer asked me if that was my vehicle. And I thought, why would you? That's not a question that you ask. You ask for my license and registration.
Wow.
And he didn't even give me a ticket. He just wanted to make sure that was my car, because I actually just purchased the car. It was a nice car. And he wanted to make sure that I didn't steal this car, I guess, and I belonged there. And when I got there, I was really upset. And I told this therapist that, and her response to me, how do you know it was mostly racially motivated?
What?
I said, well, I'm telling you it was, because I know that it was. And she said, well, we don't know that for sure. I think that's a standard question. I said, you're invalidating me? And it was 10 minutes into the session. I picked up my bag and I walked out, and she never saw me again. So, right. And after that, it took me 3 years to find a new therapist.
Yeah, you didn't just give up. That's the thing. I mean, I feel like finding a therapist is like finding any other relationship. I mean, when you're looking for friends or when you're looking for a romantic partner, you just can't, the first person that you meet, it's not going to necessarily be a match made in heaven. And I think it's the same way with therapists.
Yeah. And it's a very vulnerable relationship. We're going to know your stuff. I tell my clients that all the time. That's why I do consultation. I tell them about who I am, my style of therapy before they get into it, because I'm different. Every therapist are different, right? I bring me into the space. So I need them to know that, before they commit to me. And they can commit to me and they realize, she's not a good match, and that's okay. You're not going to find, I tell my clients all the time, like, hey, listen, this is a very vulnerable relationship. You're going to tell me things about yourself that other people don't know, and you're going to feel shame sometimes. But my job is to create a safe space for you.
Right.
And that's it. That's all we can do.
Exactly. And I understand that. I had to go through, I found a really good therapist, and then she kind of scaled back on her workload, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So ever since I've been looking around, and it's not easy, but don't give up.
It's not easy.
I do want to switch gears just a little bit here, and so I wanted to know, when we ask you about mental abuse, how would you define it? Because here we kind of box in mental abuse as pretty much anything that's not physical. I mean, emotional abuse, verbal abuse, financial abuse, all of those things here at
Okay.
Sama, we consider a part of mental abuse. But you, being the expert, how would you define it?
Oh, wow. So that's different. So I would not categorize it like that. I know it's important to, because the thing about it, they all have all of it. I'm going to say this, part of the work, I got into this field as a sexual assault prevention coordinator. So part of my work, I actually had to teach these things to high schoolers and middle schoolers, like make PowerPoints and go into the schools and talk about consent, healthy relationships, and all of these other things. So I'm really excited to have this conversation and kind of just defined it. So the emotional part is when somebody undermine your individual sense of self, your self-worth, your self-esteem. That is emotional. That's the emotional part. It includes constant criticism, diminishing your ability, like name calling, somebody telling you that you're not smart enough or you're stupid. That's emotional abuse, right? Or even damaging your relationship with your family, friends, or if you have kids. So those things are emotional abuse. I'm going to try to go slow because I think it's a podcast, so people can pause and take notes, because this is going to feel very much lecture-y. I'm going to try not to make it that way. So I'm going to give you examples as I go.
That's okay. Go ahead.
So imagine an emotional abusive partner. It's someone that you can never please, right? It doesn't matter what you do. They're going to find a way to criticize you. And those criticism really impacts your self-esteem and the way that you feel about yourself. It impacts your self-worth. And it's like, sometimes it could be little jabs, and sometimes it could be full-blown verbal attacks on your abilities, who you are, diminishing your, name calling, like somebody calling you a bitch, for example. Like, that's not okay. It doesn't matter how angry you are, name calling is not okay. It's never okay. As adults, we're in relationships, there's a way that we can communicate. I've been with my partner for 4 years, and we've gotten into stuff, and I've never called him name, and he's never called me names. So far, so good. Like, we've been able to say what we got to say without calling somebody anything but a child of God. Like, that's not cool. We don't,
right,
because you can't take that back once you put it out there.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got the financial part that you were talking about. That's a big piece, right? It's the way that we define financial abuse is it's the way somebody making individual financial dependent, making you financially dependent on them by maintaining total control over your finances.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw a video on Instagram a few weeks ago of this young lady who said that her partner works, and her direct deposit goes straight to his account, and he gives her an allowance. And a lot of people were like calling her dumb and everything. And she's sharing that, like, oh, I trust them. This is part of submission. But that's a big red flag. You actually are more likely to be a victim of financial abuse in that way,
yes,
than not. And in my work, that's how a lot of my clients came into my practice, where they are in a hopefully you don't hear this. My partner is making the biggest smoothie in the world while I'm recording this.
It's okay. I don't hear anything.
Okay, perfect. So that's a big red flag, because this person, where your money is going to his bank account, you have no access to the money that you work for. So if something would happen, what are you gonna do? And that's a lot of that stuff that I used to see with my clients, especially like, they have no money. They will come into this to the shelter that I used to work in, the agency, and they had no money. They had no way to feed their children. This person will completely cut them off financially. While this client was working, now they have no money. They have no credit cards because everything was in this abuser's name. So there are a lot of, you got to be careful. There's, part of a healthy relationship, of course, is merging finances. But you should never completely give away your control over your finances.
Oh yeah.
Because you open yourself up to some shit. I'm sorry.
Right. And you know what? I also, because this happened to me in a previous relationship, I had a guy that was pretty much purposely trying to make me lose my job.
Yes, that's the financial abuse as well.
That's a big one. Yeah.
Yeah, withholding your access to money, stopping you from going to school, in your job, kind of like going to your job. I had one of the scenarios that I had was this young man who, his girlfriend, every job he gets, his girlfriend makes sure that he loses it, because she would come to his job and throw fists. I know you're cheating on me with your coworkers. All of those things are tactics that abusers use. And when we talk about abusers, women can do it too. So we have to be very mindful of that. I think when we talk about abusers, people have an idea of who abusers are. A lot of us are in abusive relationships. We don't even know it. Or we know it, but it's normalized, and there's nothing that we don't say anything about it. But someone's making you late for work or sabotaging your employment. That's financial abuse. Withholding resources as well. That's very important. We have to talk about that. Like withholding those kind of resources. Let's say, my partner and he makes more money than I do. And he knows that. Let's say he makes 6 figures and then I make $50,000. And then he's like, you're going to have to contribute half and half to the house. So even though he makes double than what I do. He's putting me in a financial situation where I won't be able to take care of myself. And that's not cool.
I've been in that situation too. Yep, I hear it. I hear it. So we've talked about.
You want to keep going, or?
No, I'm here for it. So we've talked about the emotional, specifically
the financial
abuse, the financial. What else you got for me?
Psychological abuse. That's the big one. I think a lot of time I see a lot of that on social media. We're talking about mental abuse, like you were saying, and I think that's why a lot of us kind of lump them together, because it's so. Like you say, it's non-physical, so we kind of lump them together. But psychological abuse include causing fear by intimidation, threatening your partner physical harm, or to yourself, like if you leave me, I'm going to do something to myself. That's psychological abuse. Destruction of your property, forcing you to isolate from family and friends, making you move across town, gaslighting. All of that is psychological abuse, where you are questioning your own reality. That's like, am I crazy? I saw a lot of that in my clients when I work with survivors of domestic violence, where they'll tell me something and then they'll start saying, maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe you didn't mean it that way. And while I'm sitting with them, and I'm like, no, he did mean it that way. Because years and years of this person telling them, you overreacting, I didn't mean it that way, you're so sensitive. Stuff like that. And they're just like, maybe I am sensitive. And usually parents can do that to their children too. Psychological abuse, telling your children, you abusing your children, when they hold you accountable, like, oh no, I didn't do that to you. That never happened. You overreacting or kind of switching it on them. Well, after
Mm-hmm.
everything I've done for you, or I've sacrificed for you, and this is how you repay me by talking back to me when you've done something to hurt your child. That's psychological abuse. How many
Yes.
of us have that experience?
I was gonna say that's a big thing, and I feel like in the Black community, well, I gave you food, I put a roof over your head, but this is a child. This child didn't ask to be here. You're a parent. This is your responsibility, and it's kind of like they use it against you until you die.
That's your one job.
Yeah, so I definitely recognize that, and I see it in my own family. So
Yeah,
yes.
I've seen it. I've experienced it, just my mom has done so much better these days. And, because of I'm a therapist and she's done her work where she can acknowledge. But I have friends who say, I don't, it's surprising how you can talk to your mom and tell your mom how she impacted you and she can apologize to you. I could never even say that to my mom. She'll lose it.
Oh
And I'm
yeah.
like, no, like I'm able to like say, mom, like I remember when I was 16, this happened and this is what you did and this is how it makes me feel. And her saying, holy crap, I'm sorry. But it took us a while to get there.
Oh yeah, that is beautiful. I have look, I'm telling you right now, I have family members, and if I try to have that conversation with them, it'll turn into them crying or kind of deflecting, or it just won't be accepted. Like I know my feelings wouldn't be validated, so I'm not gonna even waste the time anymore.
Yeah.
So
And that's
yeah,
psychological abuse right there. Like just feeling like you're being invalidated and somebody gaslighting you. And that's somebody making you question your own reality and perception of things.
yes.
Where it's just like, wait, I'm telling you the sky is blue and you're telling me the sky is black. Is it black? So after a
Oh
while, you just
yeah.
like, maybe the sky is black. Maybe I need to get my eyes checked. And that's what survivors do a lot of time because these abusers could be so convincing.
Mm-hmm.
They're so convincing. And they have a way of flipping it. They have a way of making it your problem. Well, I did this because you did this to me. I am doing this to you because of you.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe if you stop doing that, I will stop. And then survivors believe that, oh, if I'm good enough, if I'm smart enough, if I lose this weight, if I change my hair, this person will stop abusing me. And I'm here to tell you, you can do all of that. They're not going to stop. They're always going to add something. They're always going to add something because you can never please them because it's not meant for you to please them. The goal is for them to abuse you, and that's it. You cannot make an abuser stop abusing you by changing,
Exactly.
unfortunately.
Yeah, and I mean by doing that, I know a woman that is married to a guy that kind of fits into this description. And I used to talk to her regularly and everything was great. We had such a great connection and she was bubbly and friendly, and it just seemed like over time trying to force herself to be in this marriage for the money, it seems
Mm-hmm.
like she became a shell of the person that she was when I met her initially. And so you're changing everything. You are trying to change yourself to become what this person wants, and you end up losing yourself
Oh yeah,
or
you do.
going
You lose
going
yourself.
crazy, like because they'll convince you that you are crazy. They'll say, oh, well, I think you have depression, or they suddenly
Mm-hmm.
become some kind of therapist. And this woman
Mm-hmm.
did succumb to that. She started taking antidepressants and all of this stuff to please this one person. And I'm like, look, this is mental abuse, I'm telling you. And there are a lot of people that are in denial too, so they don't see it as mental abuse. And when you tell them, they don't like it, they get uncomfortable, or they distance themselves from you, or whatever the case. But yeah,
Yeah.
I completely understand that. Um,
Yeah. It's something that it's so personal what we're talking about. And I've learned to understand that. And I think that's why it kind of gives me a lot of empathy towards my survivors that other people don't have with them. Because you can be in denial with me. We're gonna be in denial together. Like that's cool. And I understand why you want to be
mhm,
in denial because what happened, it's like I love this person I'm vulnerable to this person, and you mean to tell me this person is a monster? So what does that say about me?
Mm-hmm.
So what that says is that I'm a victim. And a lot of us don't like being seen as victims.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why, like, a lot of time for me, I don't even tell people, hey, this is what you're experiencing. I listen. And after a while, I'm like, I think you need to talk to, if that's a friend of mine, I'll tell a friend, this all sounds very concerning to me. I love you, but you didn't ask for my advice. I think you should definitely talk to a mental health provider about this. If it's something where it's becoming, it's like life or death, I'm not going to be as passive about it. I'm going to tell you, listen, those are the resources. I can be there for you if you need my help. But I think this is what's going on in your life. But it is your life. It is your journey. You know what's best. Because a lot of people are not ready to make that transition. One of the things that one of the statistics, I think they said it takes a survivor of domestic violence 7 to 9 times before they actually leave.
Oh, yeah.
But they make 7 to 9 attempts
Mm-hmm.
before they actually leave this
Mm-hmm.
person.
It's hard.
It's not that easy. It's not, especially when you have kids together. Or there's financial abuse involved, right?
Oh, yeah.
So if I leave this person, I'm going to be homeless, and you're telling me to go to a shelter with my children? No, I'm going back. And the abusers know that. They know that. So it's just kind of give us that level of grace and empathy and say, I'm going to be patient with you. Because I would want somebody to be patient with me. If I was in that situation. So, but a lot of us lose our patience after a while. Because you're like, why don't this person leave? It's not that they don't want to. They are the expert to their own situation. They know, they thought about it. They know it's not going to work out. And maybe they feel like they don't have enough resources. Or they're not going to be supported from family, or they're not going to get support from family or friends. That's another layer too. People stay in abusive relationship because of family and friends. What are people going to think? Religion is a big one as well.
Ooh, I see. That's a whole other episode. I got that planned out. But yes, I know for a fact. There are several men that I've come into contact with that are Christian or mainly Catholic, and they'll say, "Well, if you marry someone and you get a divorce, you're going to hell." And I'm like,
oh, please.
There's no way that Jesus wants us to be abused. Like, what?
That's so, what you think that's what God is worried about?
Right.
Be divorcing your, let me stay professional.
Yeah, so
you think there's bigger things to worry about, okay?
Yeah, we covered so much, and I'm so happy you decided to come on the show. We have more to talk about. We have to do another episode together sometime soon. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I hope I was able to answer your questions, and I'm here if you have any more of them. I'm here to support you. Thank you for doing the work that you're doing. We need more education on these issues. I hope that with what you're doing, somebody can listen and say, "Oh, I'm gonna get some help and leave this person."
Oh yeah.
I hope that's the goal.
That is the goal.
That we
yes.
help at least one person, at least one.
So thanks again for joining us for this episode with Miss Vanessa. It was a pleasure to meet her. Like I said, I do anticipate having her on again, but I just want to remind you all to follow us on all of our socials. Facebook, we are at Sisters Against Mental Abuse. Instagram, Sama Together Now. And if you have a story to share, or you are a Black woman in the mental health field and want to come on our show, please do reach out at samatogethernow@gmail.com. Thank you again for listening. And remember, mental abuse is abuse.